Congratulations, Formula One. Last weekend at Suzuka had two big incidents showing why the new regulations do not work at all.
Congratulations, San Francisco! You've ruined pizza. First the Hawaiians, and now you.
By the way, welcome to my new YouTube channel, and this is the very first video on it. I'm gonna talk about Formula One on this one instead of Star Wars like my other YouTube channel. Anyway, we are 3 races into the 2026 Formula One season, and we are seeing clearly that these regulations that they've introduced this year are not working well, especially because of all the ways that the engine now works. These engines rely so much more on the battery than they ever did before, and the internal combustion engine is pretty much nullified. I mean, it's still there, but it's not as significant as it used to be. And it's really affecting the way that the drivers are racing their cars. We saw from the very first weekend in Australia during the onboards that drivers are lifting on the straights. They're not pushing flat out. And this is just absolutely ridiculous. Because all of a sudden, one of the most exciting things about Formula One, pushing a car in qualifying for like a minute and a half, did not really seem to be the case anymore. All of a sudden that was just gone. Now, on the Sunday of the Grand Prix, there was at least a bit more excitement with the racing because there were actual passes and repasses for the lead. So it seemed like it was getting good. However, if you narrow it down to what it really is, it's one driver passing another because the battery of the other is gone. Like Charles Leclerc would pass George Russell, and then George Russell would pass Charles Leclerc, and vice versa, and vice versa. And it's like, okay, the battle for the lead is there, but is it just because one is out of battery at one point and then the other at the next point? It seems kind of gimmicky and artificial, and it's like not really F1. But then last weekend at Suzuka, this illustrated it the most, because during the first 2 weekends, they showed the onboard pole lap in its entirety, and people were complaining about the fact that, the drivers were lifting on the straights. So what did they do for Suzuka? They decided to show the onboard pole lap until the point where they lifted off the straight, and they, for the first time in history, went to an offboard shot for the pole lap. Now, Formula One claimed that this was a technical issue, but no one is buying it. Just look at the comments on the video. Everyone hates the fact that they cut it away. If they hadn't cut away, it would still get hate, but not as much as this, I think. Look at the dislikes on this video. It's insane. But what was even worse during the Suzuka weekend, this is the other thing that happened, is the crash from Ollie Bearman. If we look at the onboard, we can see that Bearman is much faster than Colapinto at a point where you shouldn't really have that much overspeed compared to the driver next to you. I've been following Formula One long enough to know where the conventional overtaking points are on the circuit, and this is the farthest from. Even though it's like a little bit of a straight, no one ever tries an overtake into Spoon Curve. And that's why it was so weird that all of a sudden Bearman was so much faster. This is simply a case of Colapinto is charging his battery, that's why he's going slow. Bearman is going at normal speed, but because of that, he has so much overspeed that he needs to take avoiding action into the grass and then crashes into the barrier at 50 Gs. That's a huge crash. Now, thank God Ollie Bearman actually got out of the car and is alright, but we also saw after he got out of that car, he was limping. He was very hurt based off that crash. And that crash is caused because of this battery bullshit going on. At this point, F1 needs to take a look at themselves and figure out what to do with these regulations, because they're putting the drivers' lives at risk at this point. Maybe just bring back last year's cars. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a McLaren fan and of course we were excellent last year. No, I'm honestly saying that because the racing was better, the qualifying was better, and I feel that the cars were at least safer to a certain degree. Look, of course, we're not going to go back to last year's cars. I'm making a bit of a joke here. But F1 now has a 5-week break to figure out what to do, and they need to use this to figure out what to do instead of silencing us, because F1 themselves have been handling this so poorly. Already in the first weekend during the Australian Grand Prix, they showed this graphic of overtakes everywhere. However, it's not really an overtake if George passes Charles and Charles passes George back, and at the end it's the same as it was. You can claim that it's two overtakes, but any real fan will know, yeah, it's just because battery deployment levels were different. And it's not really an overtake if it just goes back to the way it was.
Ask any racer, any real racer.
So I feel this graphic is not showing the true picture. And then in the next weekend, I believe they decided to, at one point, get rid of replies on one of the tweets that had a lot of backlash from fans, where F1 decided to tweet something about the new regulations. Fans were hating on it on Twitter, and F1 decided to say, no, we're gonna switch off the replies now. We're gonna hide replies. That's the worst thing you can do. And even worse, with this cut of the onboard on the pole lap, all of these things are a clear indication that F1 is panicking right now. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to handle this. And the point that I'm trying to say is, F1, stop what you're doing. It's not working. It's hurting your image even more so. You think you might be fixing your image, but it really is not. The thing is that we as fans, especially the people who have been watching Formula One for decades like myself, we know how this sport works. We've been following it along for a very long time. We have seen several regulation cycles, and we know that a regulation cycle changes certain things. However, F1 has never reacted the way that they did, like this, like censoring people and cutting away from an onboard for the first time ever. And this clearly just shows that F1 does not want to take responsibility for the fact that they actually created bad regulations. Right now, we will have a 5-week break until Miami. 5 weeks for Formula One to figure out what to do with it. They should listen to us fans who actually have constructive criticism. I understand that there are some blind fans hating, and of course the blind hate, that always just happens. Ignore that, but listen to the people who actually have constructive criticism. There are a lot of them. Because if you see roughly 3 times the amount of dislikes than likes on an onboard pole lap video, you are clearly doing something wrong. Because you are devaluing the fans' knowledge of the sport. You're making sure that fans don't get a say in it and don't get to see what's actually happening when we already know it anyway. Because we saw the onboards for China and Australia. We saw that they lifted on the straight. And we have criticism of it, but that's just that. If you all of a sudden start to cut away, then people are starting to hate on you even more so. So, Formula One, I want you to figure out what you're doing right now, because I have loved this sport for decades. It's absolutely my favorite sport that I follow. There's a reason that I just started this YouTube channel about it, and I want them to figure it out so that we can continue in a more normal way. And you know what the thing is? I should love Japan because it showed that McLaren is competitive again, but I still am sitting here criticizing their new regulations and criticizing the Japanese weekend in Suzuka because I still have an issue with certain things that happen that have nothing to do with my team. Of course, I'm happy that Oscar was leading the race and got a P2 and showed pace that may lead to more in the future. But I cannot ignore the fact that they cut away from an onboard on a pole lap for the first time ever, that Bearman had a very serious crash and he's kind of lucky to walk away from that. I can't ignore that as an objective fan of the sport, despite my bias towards a certain team, you know. You know, as a very controversial figure in Formula One the last couple of years has said,
change your fucking car.
Anyway, that is the end of my video. If you have any thoughts about this, please share it in the comments below. Leave a like on it if you did. And of course, subscribe to my channel to support the channel. And until the next time, take care.